Yes, yes. Okay, here we go. Oh, I hate this part. Alright, okay, let's just... This is
So welcome to the jungle, and we are so pleased that so many of you lovers of fiction have joined us for this fantasy adventure. For what you are about to witness is an annual rite of passage, the predictable convening of young people in search of the yellow jacket heart. And though many of you have walked over the bridge into the world of make-believe, these four face new problems and new challenges as new and old avatars while having to save this land. You may see the glowing green water or a black stallion. You may discover that friends are needed most when they are scarred and insecure. Who are the four? One has taken the form of a strong archaeologist. One is a diminutive zoologist and weapons carrier. One takes the form of an overweight expert in many fields. And the fourth is a scantily clad commando. It is your imagination which will provide you with the answers to the question, which ones are which, as we take you to the next level. First up will be a production intern from the Washington Wild Things, Joe Veneziale. The second, a production intern for the Washington Wild Things, Nick Staso. The third, a media relations intern for the Washington Wild Things, plus, may I add, a President Athletic Conference 2022 Football Honorable Mention Selection, Joel Zellem. And fourth, an underwater videographer, an intern for Africa Media, who experienced her internship in South Africa, Hayley Sweeney. Ladies and gentlemen, the four interns.
First of all, I want to say thank you, Lainey, and thank you everyone for coming out and joining us today. So when I was first looking for my internship, I didn't know exactly where I wanted to be. I was looking at news stations, radio stations, places that I thought I felt fit. I also was rejected due to COVID-19 reasons by one station. I don't want to name any names, WQED. But nonetheless, an opportunity came to me, or was brought upon to us, in Mr. Krause's history broadcasting class. And that was Kyle Dawson, a Waynesburg University alum who is Assistant General Manager of Baseball Operations for the Washington Wild Things, and gave us this opportunity for many internships to be a part of the Washington Wild Things. And I knew that was my fit. And with that opportunity, it turned to be a wild summer. And my basic duties as a production intern was basically just to run the production camera and be a camera operator for our live stream broadcasts. And we had three different cameras. Our first camera is the broadcast camera, or better known as the play-by-play camera, which was set up right behind home plate to grab the ball and follow what the play was happening and the action that was taking place. The second camera was the first base camera. Tight shots of the batter, getting creative liberties and creative shots of whatever we wanted to do. And the third camera was the third base camera. It was also tight shots of the pitcher, as well as creative liberties to get shots of whatever we wanted. And our fourth camera was the roaming camera, capturing fan content for in-game entertainment and social media platforms. And some of those platforms were indeed Instagram and Twitter, and specifically this social media content for celebrity softball that I produced myself. I will now play that video. And celebrity softball was just one of the opportunities that I was given for myself to really show my craft of videography and what I've learned in the Wild Things so far. And the first one, like I had attested to, was celebrity softball. I had field access and a media pass to capture content for in-game and social media platforms. Me on the left with Tone Diggs, a social media personality on the Pat McAfee Show podcast, as well as Braun Strowman, a WWE superstar. They're very nice people, and I was very, very grateful to meet them in my time there. As well as IWC Wrestling. I was capturing B-roll content of the wrestling event held at Wild Things Park to capture that content for social media platforms as well as the fans to see. And the third opportunity that I was brought upon to myself was the All-Star Game. We hosted the All-Star Game at Wild Things Park for the Frontier League All-Star Game, like I should say, and we broadcasted the Frontier League All-Star Game, and I ran for first base camera for that event. And I couldn't have done it without the travel and the crew call that was brought upon by myself and my bosses. The travel was about 42 miles from my home in Pittsburgh to Washington, which it wasn't an unusual drive for me, as it is basically the same drive that I would get to come to Waynesburg University. But gas was expensive. And as we all know, gas was very expensive over the summer, but expenses were made by my second job employed at Home Depot. Crew call was between 3:30 and 5. 3:30 on Sundays, the games would start on Sundays at 5:30, and 5 o'clock on weekdays between 4 and 5, depending on start time of the game, between 7 and 7:30. And I couldn't have done it without these two men right here. My main boss on the left, Sean Seaman, the production manager for the Washington Wild Things, who's not currently employed at the Washington Wild Things. He works for KDKA Fan Nation now, but he was a very important role and gave all of my duties to do for the games that were brought upon by myself. And the man on the right here is a Waynesburg University alum. Some of you may know him. It is Kyle Dawson. He's the Assistant General Manager of Baseball Operations for the Washington Wild Things. And that man right there has brought a great opportunity for us this season, as we were the first year to stream on Flow Sports, specifically Flow Baseball. And I titled this slide "The Season of Firsts" because a lot of firsts happened with Flow Sports. This is the first year streaming on Flow Sports. It was the first paid subscription network to stream the Washington Wild Things in their time, in their 20 seasons as being a team. And the Wild Things had the most unique total viewers on streams with 31,678 viewers, the most in the Frontier League. And with that accomplishment, there were many other accomplishments, as we won the 2022 Frontier League Organization of the Year. And I couldn't have done it without my coworkers and employees employed at the Wild Things. And another accomplishment that I will hold true in my heart is I made connections that will last a lifetime. I still am in contact with Sean, I still am in contact with Kyle, and I am still in contact with all of my peers that I worked with at the Wild Things. And I will cherish those connections throughout my entire lifetime. And I enhanced my videography skills. I felt accomplished by the end of my internship because I felt that I had made it. I made it to an actual streaming broadcast for a professional team in the Wild Things, and I really enhanced my skills in that time. But the main takeaway that I took for being a production intern at the Wild Things is to always remain flexible. And that is why I honed it in this next slide, which is flexibility. Because my original role for being a production intern was just mainly working on the broadcast camera side of things, being camera operator, only focusing on the streams. But I was only mainly play-by-play throughout the first half of the season due to our director, Jeremiah Miller, in that time, only putting me there. But nonetheless, the roaming camera was a new opportunity for me. And that came to me in July when I was on the field for celebrity softball. And that's where I felt most at home, because I knew that I could produce the content to make forever fans, as the Wild Things say, and to produce that content to show what we have done in our time there. And finally, as I made my way throughout the season, towards the end of the season, as we were in the playoff contention, I directed our only home playoff game, as shown in the picture on the left. And I felt that whatever opportunity that was given to me, I had to take it, and I had to remain flexible in my time there. And I leave you with this quote: "You don't get it unless you're immersed in it." And that was said by the man, Kyle Dawson. And you don't. I didn't get it at first. It's a semi-professional team. It's not the MLB, obviously. It's not the minor leagues. But it is a semi-professional team with forever fans that truly made it special to why I did that internship. And you don't get it unless you are truly immersed in it. Thank you for enjoying my presentation. Any questions?
31,000 fans for your big broadcast. How did that really feel?
Felt amazing. I mean, like I said, I felt accomplished, and we felt like that we put the hard work in and made sure that we put in our 100% effort every time, and it really felt accomplishing by the end of the season.
Did you find it challenging when your role kind of switched the way you were supposed to be doing in the beginning to something else?
No, I was more excited because, you know, it's just a new opportunity for me to show my skills, and I really felt comfortable in those scenarios.
Joe, you were able to direct the final playoff game. Did you take anything away from that also, from a different point of view from running camera, that really it was able to benefit you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously doing the productions here, I mean, I've had that experience in that, but nonetheless, it was just more of a kind of a new step for me. It was the end of the season as well, so it just was really, really relieving, and I felt like I made it at that point. Thank you. And our next presenter, Nicholas Staso.
Awesome. Yeah, like Joe said, thank you guys for coming out. We really do appreciate it. We know today is the day before Thanksgiving break, and a lot of people are home, but we do appreciate it. So I did my internship over the summer with the Washington Wild Things. I was a video production intern. And Benny, who was our PA announcer, every home game he liked to state, we create forever fans. And at the beginning of the season, that motto really stuck with me, because not only do the baseball players and the employees, they create forever fans, but it really takes everybody. So interns, employees, baseball players, we all come together to create forever fans. And this internship presentation is going to explain kind of how we did it. So these are some of the main points that I'll be going over today. The pre-internship, what was it like? What were the duties? Who was in charge? 3 of my bosses. The celebrity softball game, and my end of season thoughts. So before the internship began, we had to send emails out to our hopefully prospective internship employers. And these are 2 emails that I sent one, and then I got one back from Sean Seaman, who would be my potential boss. So these 2 emails really changed my summer. As some of you may know, I moved to Orlando, Florida recently, and I really wanted to go down and live with my parents over the summer summer and do an internship down there. Things didn't play out that way, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I'm glad that I was able to do the Wild Things internship over the summer, and these are the 2 emails that kind of jump-started that internship. So what was it like? So I worked almost every home game due to that reason, because I live only 5 minutes from the Wild Things Park. I spent the summer living with my grandmother, who still lives in Washington, Pennsylvania, and she lives exactly 5 minutes from the Wild Things Park. So getting there wasn't difficult at all. However, it could be very, very stressful at times. There are some gentlemen at the internship who worked multiple jobs in the morning and then would come to the Wild Things at night. So tensions would rise because everyone was pretty exhausted. But however, it was lots of fun. You know, I can only state this because I got to work with some of my best friends, like Joe and Joel and Jeremiah, and we have a really good connection because not only were we doing an internship, and Jeremiah was my boss, one of my bosses, but we get to do it here as well. So we just took what we know here from Waynesburg and the knowledge that we've been given by the professors here, and we just strengthened it with the Wild Things. And I also got to experience new things that I never knew about live sports productions. Like we were talking about, Flow Sports, it's huge. We were the first year here, completely different than Woosten. It's all new stuff. It's just the only thing that was the same was running cameras, and I can only thank Waynesburg for giving me the knowledge how to run a camera. So who were my bosses? Sean Seaman, the gentleman who was in that one email, that's him. He was my boss. He basically gave me my instructions day to day on, what camera to run and how to, what time I should set it up. Kyle Dawson, he was my second boss. He was the boss above Sean, and he was a former alumni here at Waynesburg University. And we have just that really nice connection with Kyle, just because he is that Waynesburg alumni. He knows the professionalism that us Waynesburg students have and are able to give into a job or profession. And then Tony Basili, I put Tony there just because he is our president, and now he's been upgraded to the general manager. He's the guy that would come in 5 minutes before the game and say, "What's up, ladies?" And then the game would start, and it would just either run smoothly or not run smoothly. But I have to thank all 3 of these gentlemen here just for pushing my career a little bit further in the live sports field. So now we're going to talk about the duties as a video production intern. So I had to arrive 2 hours before the game started. Wasn't difficult for me, just because, like I said, I lived 5 minutes. We would wait an hour to get our job description, where we would be that day for the game, who we were facing, what cameras we would be running. We would set up cameras an hour before just to make sure that they worked correctly, because you don't want to plug a camera in 5 minutes before a game starts and then the SDI cable doesn't work, and Jay Hawk's over there smiling because he knows that it's happened before. We would get in places during pregame ceremonies. Most times we wouldn't film pregame ceremonies just because our job was to film the game, but there were qualifications for that, like the All-Star game, like the celebrity softball game, just because a lot of people want to see those celebrities like Kenny Pickett, like Mitch Trubisky, and so those were the specifications for that. And then the game would start, and we would film the game. However, the duties do not end. So after the game was over, we needed the okay from Jeremiah Miller to strike the cameras. There were Friday nights at Wild Things Baseball Park was Firework Fridays. So whoever worked home plate that night would have to stay and film the fireworks. So the first base camera, which is that picture of me right there, that was the first base camera angle. The first base camera and the third base camera were able to strike the cameras and proceed to leave for the night. We had to make sure that the cameras were turned off correctly, make sure they were charged overnight, just because that's that professionalism that we talked about. You don't want to leave a camera out overnight and it not be charged, because you come in the next day, if it's a home stretch, the camera's not charged, you have to wait a couple hours for it to be charged. And then after we would return the mics, the SDI cables, coil them properly, chargers and tripods to the case neatly. And then for some people who lived far away, try to meet the traffic home, just because the highway entrance that I would get on, there was a little bit of traffic. They were doing construction on I-70, so it was a little tough sometimes to get on the highway. Hitting brick walls. For those who were in Professor Krause's practicum class, we read a book called The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. Randy Pausch was a professor at Carnegie Mellon University where he specialized in virtual reality. And in the book, there's a specific part where he talks about hitting brick walls. So I did hit a couple of brick walls over the summer. I was constantly exhausted. I worked 2 jobs. So I worked at Target at 4 a.m. every day, and then I would go to the Wild Things at nights. And then if I ever had to work Target the next morning, it would just be a constant cycle of morning job, night job, morning job, night job. So I was constantly exhausted. And like I said earlier, I moved to Orlando, so I was constantly homesick. I almost had an opportunity working, like I said, with an internship down in Orlando, but it didn't work out. And I miss my family. You know, it's different seeing your family on FaceTime than it is in person. Part of me wanted summer to be over. Like I said, I was exhausted constantly. I didn't want to do summer anymore, but I knew, you know, my fellow interns, they helped me get through it. They helped me get over that brick wall, or I would say break through that brick wall to just keep going and keep going strong. And I realized I do not like the sport of baseball. Yeah, baseball is just one of those sports where it's like, oh man, I love watching baseball. In person, it's great, but you know, when a game lasts 3.5 hours and it's midnight and you have to get up for an early shift at work, you start to hate baseball. It really became a drag. However, I wouldn't really say this is a brick wall, but I just knew that I had to keep pushing through because this internship was something that I knew was going to further my career in the live sports field. Celebrity softball. So the celebrity softball game was a game that was played by Team Pittsburgh and Team World. A couple famous people you might recognize. Top left is Kenny Pickett, starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mitch Trubisky is the second string quarterback, Cam Hayward, and then just a bunch of gentlemen here who are famously in the Pittsburgh area. I would state that this right here changed the internship for me. Like I said, I was hitting brick walls, but when the celebrity softball game came to Washington, it changed things. I loved the internship. I'm not saying that I didn't love it previously, but it really just re-sparked that key for me, for this love for the internship. End of the line. So as September came, there were only 4 to 5 interns left, me and a couple of Waynesburg students. So you can see that some of the Waynesburg students decided to stay on. I had a total of 168 hours of time intern at the Wild Things, so you can do the math on how many days that is. And I would do it 100 more times. I would not change my internship just because of the people who I worked with, the environment that I worked with, the environment I worked out at, and the people I got to meet and the connections I made. So yeah, I would not change it. These are a couple of pictures that I have. As you can see, that is the Wild Thing mascot. He took my phone and took a picture of me and Stephanie. Stephanie works with the street team at the Wild Things, and then the boys. These 3 guys here are three of the many of people that I interned with over the summer, and it was indeed a wild thing. Are there any questions? Yes, Wes.
You talked about, in late nights, some tension would occur.
Yeah.
You think you could talk a little bit about that?
Well, as I said, Jeremiah Miller was my director, so he would be one of the voices I'd hear constantly every night, which isn't a bad thing, Jay. It's just that Jay was tired. Jay worked at PennDOT, I believe, and he would have early mornings, 8-hour shifts. I'd have 8-hour shifts in the morning. Joe worked at Home Depot, so tensions would rise, and we're all guys, so our tensions flare a little bit. So yeah, I guess guys can be guys, and we just kind of butt heads a little bit. Any other questions? Abby.
I know the Washington Wild Things had theme nights. Was there a favorite theme night that you had?
Oh goodness. I have to say either Star Wars night or Stranger Things night, just because there was a gentleman who dressed up as Steve Harrington in the Scoops Ahoy outfit, so it's pretty interesting to see him walking around the field. And then just Star Wars, because I'm a huge nerd. I mean, come on, that's Star Wars. Colin Rhodes.
So how did you handle any sort of like just random things happening that you weren't expecting? Like maybe something goes wrong with the camera or...
It's funny that you bring that up. The third base camera actually, a month into the internship, the box where you would plug the cord into broke. So we could not use that shot. So for the remainder of the season, we had to take a high home angle. So it'd be the home plate camera, and then the high home, and then a first base. So, excuse me, yes, you were missing that third base shot, but at the same time, I mean, we're all really good videographers that we were able to get those great shots. There were rain nights where, I mean, luckily I didn't have to be out in the rain, but I can't say the same for Joe Veneziale. But, you know, having a rain come out there knowing that it's going to rain and thunderstorm, that was just one of the big things. Just because the home plate and the high home shot were under the canopy, but the first base camera shot, you're out in the open. So that's probably one of the biggest setbacks. I think that's it. Oh, Jay, yes, one more.
Any advice? So all these trick balls you were hitting, that's difficult stuff. What pulled you through? Was it?
It was a multitude of things, I'd have to say. My fellow interns, my bosses, Kyle especially, just because he would say to us, guys, I know you're kicking butt, and I know that baseball is a tough sport to film, but you guys are kicking butt. You just got to keep pushing through. We're almost done. So yeah, it was just kind of the fellow interns and then the support from the boss. That's it. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Our next speaker is Joe Zellem.
Before I start, I do want to say thank you everyone for coming out at this time. Again, break is right around the corner, and it means a lot that you're willing to give up some of your time to come watch these presentations. And before I start again, I have a question. Show of hands, does anybody like gambling? No, seriously, a lot of proud. I bet you, I'm going to say something you haven't heard twice already today, and the loser has to give this presentation. Because I did my internship with the Washington Wild. The commute was not as far as Joe and was not as close as Nick, and I actually had the pleasure of staying right down the road with one of my good friends, Caleb Stevens. He took me in for over the summer, so it was closer for me to get there. It was a week on for 6 home games and a week off as they would go on the road. So when we had a week of games, I would stay down on Porter Street, and it was also another good opportunity for me to work out over the summer with some of my teammates. Originally, I went to go be a media relations intern where I would write social media posts, game recaps, and player of interest stories. And I took sports writing with Joe Starkey here, and when I was writing these recaps, all I could think to myself was him in my ear saying, paint a picture, like, and entertain. But these game recaps weren't that. It was just the plays that changed the game, such as hits, runs, and outs. If there was ever a milestone from a player like Hector Roa becoming the all-time home run leader for this team, you would write about it in your recap. But that's not how I ended, and it was actually quickly turned up on its head. I kept the same title, but I had a way different focus. I didn't write after the first 2 weeks. Sean Seaman, who wasn't supposed to be my boss, came up to me and said, hey, people quit. Not Waynesburg people, of course, but people quit. Here's a camera. And meanwhile, my experience with the camera outside of Dr. Sherman's photography class, most of you know, I didn't have any experience. And I was a little bit scared because all I wanted to do was put my best foot forward and do a good job. And it was something that I didn't have a field of expertise in. I was a much better writer. So going into it, I was obviously nervous, but it gave me an opportunity to be on the field during the game, before the game, after the game. I got to interact with players who are just guys that are athletes in their mid-20s trying to play the sport that they love. So you can imagine that we all had a lot in common. And that made us acquaintances, and then everything we talked about outside of that made us friends. So that was a really good experience for me, just building those relationships with those guys. And then down at the bottom, fan interaction, the guy in the middle of that pyramid, his name's Joey. He's an aspiring country music singer. And all of his friends there, I got to meet them. They were always there on Thursday. They were always a good crowd to host, always good for content and pictures. And not only does building those friendships, it's good for you, but it's one of those things where if you're friends with the fans that you're taking pictures of, they'll probably be a little bit more camera friendly because they know who you are, and that's exactly what the case was. Some of the pictures that I got to take, the first photo all the way to the left is Jared Mang, and we would do high five tunnels every Thursday and Friday, and this was just my favorite shot to get. You got all the kids' hands reached out for the player walking out excited before the game, and you get to capture not only the happiness of the kids because they don't care that that guy's not in the MLB. They don't care that that guy's not making millions of dollars. All they see is a baseball player who they're all really good. And that made their day to get to talk to them, to get to high five them as they're running off to the field. And that's the aspect of the Wild things that make forever fans, because you don't get that experience in the majors. You don't get that experience in the minors. It's something that's truly unique in a sport that they get to have, and getting to take pictures of those moments. And to become good at it, my first pictures didn't look anything like these. Like, it was bad. I was always asking Sean, hey, what can I do better? Can I get some advice? Can I get some pointers? Because my pictures didn't look like that. But as I got to practice, I got to capture the moments that you see up here. Just, you don't make these faces and pictures in the middle that you pose for. This is just, hey, kids see a camera, let's do something crazy because we're having a great time. And getting that and getting to see these pictures on the Washington Wild Things website, it really was like a moment for me that's like, hey, yeah, you're not a photographer, but you can be a photographer if you really had to. The big bulk of my internship was running Instagram stories, and I literally ran around like a madman with my phone, capturing moments like the donut ring toss, and it would just look like it's my Snapchat story, and that's because that's what it was. The Instagram story was an opportunity to give people who weren't able to make the game, who followed the social media account, a chance to be like, what is going on at Wild Things Park? What am I missing out on? And things like this are things, it's an opportunity to reach out to an audience. My favorite shots are getting types of highlights and reactions because we are the #1 team in the West. So when a guy gets to hit a home run, come off and shake his teammates' hands, you get to see that moment that you captured, not with a professional camera, but with your cell phone. And this is another thing that's just something that I thought, I'm not a photographer, but this is something that I can do. And the Wild Things gave me that opportunity to do things like this, sharing game updates and keeping people posted who can't make it to the game or weren't able to make it to that game. And it looks like a party, because when you're at the Wild Things Park, it's almost like you want them to have a party, you want them to have fun. It's not the majors. You get to have kids dance around with your mascot, you get to have a good time. And I got to be there with my phone to get the whole thing. Other miscellaneous duties that I got to run camera for the online streams, like Nick and Joe covered. I got to become a director when Jeremiah had to take a day or two. And that was a challenge that was unique because I only did one type of directing job here at Waynesburg, but I had a blast. I got to just talk to Nick and Joe, and we had fun. I got to do roaming camera, not only with my phone or a photography camera, but with a video camera as well. This is just pre-game stuff. So like when people are warming up, pitchers are warming up, batting practice, fans before games are allowed to come on the field. They would run on the field with the players as the starting lineup was announced. And I got to capture all that with a roaming camera. This was websites for ads, promotions, and things that they would put out to show people, hey, this is a unique experience. If you bring your kid, you sign them up on a sheet, they get to run out with Cole Brandon, who was a major league draft pick, played in the minor leagues. Hector Roa, who has career records in the sport of baseball. Rob Whalen, who's pitched major league games. Your kid can run out with them onto the field as they're announced in the starting lineup. It's just, when they say we make forever fans, at first it was like a corny mantra to me, because I hated the sport of baseball. Like I said, it's like watching paint dry. It takes 3.5 hours. But when you get to know the players on a personal level, you get to see the impact they have on a community. Not only they get to make the team money, but they get to create memories with fans who are just little kids. Like, think about being a little kid and you're excited about something. Like, they don't care they're not in the majors. They're just excited they get to be this close to a guy that's a superstar athlete and being celebrated like that. And the top players in the Frontier League, it's just one of those things that it made it special for me because I got to capture it. And then my other miscellaneous duty was mascot duty. And this was following the mascot around, getting pictures like this, again, capturing the moments that I've said a few times before. And it depended on who was under the suit because everybody had a different personality. But you got to know them and you got to know what kind of things they like to do during the game, whether it's messing with a guy, making him chug his beer, playing with babies, trying to get high fives, playing catch with a baby, or just posing with a group of moms. Like, the opportunities were vast and they were various. And it always kept me on my toes because you didn't know who was under that, and so you got them away from everybody and be like, hey, who's under that? Who is that? So, because they're not allowed to talk. Mascots, for you guys that don't know, you're not allowed to speak. And then the other part of that was you had to follow them around because in that helmet, you don't have a lot of peripheral vision. And as you saw earlier from the presentation, a bunch of people dancing around all crazy, like you could bump into little kids. So you have to walk with a mascot, like shoo kids away, and that kind of be the scary guy sometimes, like, hey, you can't walk right underneath his feet, he'll trip and fall over you. And it's a safety thing, but the big thing was always knowing that there was going to be something for you to get, whether there was 500 people or 50 people. Like, the mascot's job is to entertain people, and my job is to get that moment of them being entertaining for their site. My outlook is when an internship helps you strengthen old skills and help you learn new ones and serves its purpose. When an internship helps you enjoy a sport you previously hated, it becomes so much more than an internship. And sports fans, people who hold sports near and dear, you know, they know sports create moments. And I got to create moments in a sport that I played for 3 years, and I hit the ball twice. So I didn't like baseball. And I'm going to end my presentation with how I ended every day at work after I got to run the box scores for Kyle Dawson to the away locker room. And I don't know if this video does the view justice, but getting to walk across the outfield when the stadium was empty and the lights were on, and you just got to take it all in for what it was a peaceful, gentle, just sigh of, hey, the day's over, and this is what you get to look at after you walk out of the ballpark. So that was my internship with the Washington Wild Wings. I appreciate everybody's time. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Logan.
Do you think it was a benefit or distraction working with other Waynesburg interns at the Washington Wild Wings?
It was a huge benefit. As Nick said, we got the knowledge from Waynesburg. We just got to take the knowledge that, and chemistry even, that we had from doing jobs and taking classes and doing work at Waynesburg, especially Jeremiah, when I shadowed him for directing. It was just like doing a directing job here. It made it so much more easy having those familiar faces and that familiar chemistry. Like, hey, I already know that guy. I know what ticks him off. I know what makes him happy. I know how to work with him. And doing that together was something that made this way easier. Glenn, did you have a question?
So you said that you weren't really comfortable with the camera and your first pictures weren't very good. Were there times when you just thought you couldn't do that or do this job, and how did you persevere?
Yeah, I mean, I found myself caring a lot about the quality of work that I was putting forth, because not only was I representing myself, but I don't know if you guys know this, they hire Waynesburg kids. Just like, hey, you went to Waynesburg, you got the job. So not only am I representing myself, but I'm representing the university in which I attend. And I don't want to put my bad foot forward and give everybody else a bad rap and maybe have somebody else miss out on a chance. So there was definitely pressure in there, but that pressure that put on me like forced me to rise to the occasion and to really get better. I actually reached out to Dr. Sherman for pointers, and even though he doesn't work here anymore, he was willing to help. And it was one of those things that, like, hey, it's do or die, and I'm going to do it because, you know, I didn't have any other choice. And it made me put in a position that I had to be flexible, and that's a learning lesson that I'm going to be able to take into the real world. And no matter what job I get, I'm going to be able to learn how to do it. Anybody else? Yeah.
So you mentioned getting thrown into that new pool of the photography and things you were comfortable with. Did you get to work with anybody in the Wild Things? You mentioned you emailed Dr. Sherman about it. Was there anyone with the Wild Things that really got to help you kind of learn that? Or?
Yeah, and they went over our bosses, Kyle and Sean, twice, so I didn't really have them included, but Kyle was supposed to be my boss in terms of the writing, and since I didn't do any writing anymore, obviously I'd ask him for assignments, but Sean did a fantastic job of letting me ask him 150 questions if I had to. It's just one of those things where it's like, if this is my job, I'm not going to be the best photographer, but I'm going to be the best photographer that I'm capable of being. And I even ended up surprising myself with his guidance. All right. Thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate it. Our next presenter is Hayley Sweeney.
Hello everyone, I first would like to thank you all for coming today. It truly means a lot to me and I'm very excited to share my internship with you all. So if you haven't already known, my internship was studying underwater videography, and where I did this was in a small town called Umkomaas, South Africa. And as you can see on the board, it was 8,528 miles from my hometown, Johnstown, Pennsylvania. The company that I did my internship through was called Africa Media. When I was searching for an internship, I had stumbled across their website and I read their mission statement. It is, our mission is to build an enthusiastic generation of wildlife and environmental specialists who have the skills and passion to build successful careers or make significant contributions in the wildlife and environmental media industry. Now, as soon as I read that, I knew that I was going to be a perfect fit for this internship. Now, the founder of Africa Media is Ryan Johnson. He is a shark specialist and an underwater videographer. For those of you that watch Shark Week, you may have seen him appear on that a few times. My instructor for the course was Chris Saunders. He is an instructor and also an underwater videographer. My dive master was Kyle Young. He is a scuba instructor and a dive master. And for those of you that don't know what a dive master is, it is someone who leads and guides your every dive. Now, my internship had more of a schooling aspect to it. So while I was there for the 1 month that I was there, I studied underwater videography course that they gave me. So this course had 43 lectures, 5 quizzes, and 1 final exam. And while I was doing this, I was also doing hands-on work, which I'll be showing you later throughout my presentation. Now the dives I did a total of 22 dives, and I completed these dives in the Alwal Shaw, which is a reef located along the coast of South Africa. Now before I get into the nitty-gritty of my internship, I would like to show you my first video that I created. I want you to pay attention to the camera quality, the color, and the stability of this video. After I completed making this video, I went up to my instructor and I told him that I was worried I wasn't going to be a good underwater videographer. And he had told me that it takes patience and practice to become better. Now I'd like to get into the meat and potatoes of my internship, which was underwater videography. So I'm first going to talk about the camera setup and the equipment. So the camera that I used was a Sony camera, and then the underwater housing that I used was the Naughty Cam. And so I would insert the Sony camera into the underwater housing, and then I would attach the lights by using arms and knuckles. And luckily, the Naughty Cam had a vacuum seal. So what I would have to do is I would pump out all of the air in my underwater housing, and then a tiny green light would appear. And as soon as I saw the green light, I knew that my camera would not be vulnerable to any water getting inside of it. But if that light did turn red, that means that water could potentially get inside of my camera. Now, a big part of underwater videography is scuba diving, and I want to talk about scuba gear first. So as you can see, there's a picture of me on the board. I'm wearing a tank, I'm wearing a mask, I'm wearing my weight belt, my wetsuit. The thing in my hand is my regulator. It's actually supposed to be in your mouth, but it's okay. My VC is on me. A VC is basically your life vest that inflates and deflates during your dives, and I am also wearing flippers. Now, the difference between underwater videography and land-based videography is you can stand here and record something with land-based and nothing can really get in your way. With underwater videography, you have so many different aspects that you have to take in consideration. One being buoyancy. So we have to master our buoyancy underwater. That way we're not floating to the surface or sinking towards the bottom. And the camera does add 10 pounds, so you have to master your buoyancy with the camera in hand. Then we have current and riptides. So the current is constantly flowing in the ocean. And so what I learned very quickly is that you have to fight the current if you want to get a shot. Because if you go with the current, then you're going to completely miss any shots that you want to capture. Then we have visibility. So the visibility of the ocean is essential when filming. And you should always know the visibility in the water before you go diving. Because if you can't see in the water, then neither can your camera. And then lastly, I want to talk about marine life. So marine life is constantly surrounding you while you're in the ocean. And you have to just be aware of every tiny little detail around you. An example of this is I was facing this way, recording a shark, and then I turned around and another shark was coming at me this way. So if I wasn't paying attention, then that could have potentially ended badly. Now every day I had certain responsibilities, and these three were camera maintenance, scuba gear maintenance, and equipment setup. With camera maintenance, I would have to dunk my camera in fresh water after every dive in order to get the salt water off. Once this would dry, I would then disassemble the camera, I would clean the lens, clean the O-rings, and then charge every single battery. Then scuba gear maintenance was pretty simple. I had to do the same thing, rinse it off in fresh water, and then hang it to dry for the next day, because nobody likes to dive in a soggy, cool wetsuit. Then I have equipment setup, and I would assemble my camera housing every day, and then I would test every battery voltage. And the reason that I tested every battery voltage, because if you're 40 feet below the surface and your camera dies and your lights die, you can't really do anything until after the dive is over. Then I would attach my lighting to my camera housing, and after this was all complete, I would perform a dunk test. And what a dunk test is I would dip my camera in the water, and then I would lift it up and see if any water had gotten into my camera housing. Because like I said, if you're 40 feet below the surface and your camera housing starts to fill with water, then your camera will be destroyed. And lastly, I did scuba diving equipment setup every day, which I learned in my open water certification course, so that was pretty simple for me. Then we have editing. So with editing, we use Adobe Premiere Pro, and I was thankful for this because we use that here at Waynesburg, and I've taken various classes, so I knew the basic editing program. And there was a couple different things with this, one being color correction. So as you go deeper into the water, you tend to lose your colors. So when you bring that back into the editing program, you have to manually bring them back. And instead of manually, sometimes we would use LUTs, which were lookup tables. They are basically filters that you put over top of a video in order to bring back the colors. But those were difficult because each video was different. Now warp stabilizer, that was my best friend during my internship because, as I mentioned previously, you have your buoyancy and the current of the ocean, and it's constantly making you move, so your footage is shaky, and that would just make your footage stable. Then finally I have sequences. So with sequences, I would have a shot list every day before a dive, and I would create this shot list so it would be easier for me to tell a story when editing. Then I have two miscellaneous things, masking and audio alterations. Masking was a big one for me. I had never learned it before. It is when you layer multiple videos onto one in order to create one final product. And my instructor and I sat down for 4 hours to create this one video using masking.
These things are magic. They take you to another world.
As you can see, we use land-based videography and underwater videography in order to make this video. Now that I'm done talking about my internship as a whole, I would like to show you all my final video. Due to time constraints, I can't show you the full thing, but I want you to remember the very first video that I showed you and compare it and see how much I improved during the month of my internship. as you can see, my instructor was right. It did take patience and practice to become a better underwater videographer. Now, before I conclude, I'd like to talk about the personal impact that South Africa had on me. My very first day of my internship, I had called my mom and I said, "Mom, I want to do this for the rest of my life." And I say this because I fell in love with the daily routine of things, because it really didn't feel like a job to me, because I was in my favorite place, surrounded by my favorite animals, which are sharks, all while scuba diving. And it was very hard for me to leave my internship because I truly felt where I belonged. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Jayhawk?
So Kyle Dawson wasn't there, right? How did you get there? That's 5,200 whatever miles. How did you find them? How did you decide this is where I'm going to go? This is entirely insane, frankly.
Yes, so what I did, I was honestly just searching as much stuff on underwater videography as I could. And then I found African Media and I got in contact with them. And of course my mom had to make sure it was safe, and then, yeah, it took me 4 flights to get there and then 5 flights back. So, yes, it's one of a kind.
So for a lot of people, it's fair to say that the idea of being stranded in the middle of the ocean and being surrounded by marine life that could potentially kill you, it's not the most comfortable situation to be in, but how do you feel when you're in the water?
I feel calm. I know that may sound crazy, but I feel like I belong in the ocean with them. I'd like to stay there if I could, but no, it's very peaceful, and scuba diving in general is just, I'd recommend it to anybody.
Do you think that this is going to open up doors for a possible career for you?
Yes, it already has. They did give me a job offer for next year to be an assistant instructor for the course. And then Ryan Johnson, as I mentioned, he works for Shark Week. So I'm hoping I can squeeze my way in there, because that's the end goal for me. And Rebecca.
I guess outside of the job opportunity, what other career opportunities are available in the field?
So there is freelancing, and then working for companies like Discovery Channel, and also you can do just uploading your video to spot websites. But the common one is doing freelancing.
What was your favorite part of the internship?
It's funny you mentioned that, because I do have one photo of the shark right in front of my face, and that was the best part of my internship, because I was absolutely terrified, but I was extremely happy at the same time. Thank you all for coming. The next internship presentations will be Tuesday, November 29th at 12 o'clock p.m. The presenters are Gwen Napier, Rebecca Vaughn,